Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Hello friends, I, Assistant Professor Mayur Thakur, welcomes you all in the video lecture series of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, Ahmedabad. In today's session, we are going to discuss the block number 2 of unit number 9, Literature and Other Arts in the first year BA course of Main English. In today's session, we are going to discuss that how literature and other arts are connected with each other. We'll see the relationship, and we also see that how art is relevant to the other field as well. And literature has played a major role. In literature, we see the references of many other arts, and we will discuss in today's presentation in detail. So, we are going to discuss about literature and arts, that how arts and literature both are interconnected with each other. In literature, whether it is poetry, whether it is drama, whether it is fiction, non-fiction, in any work, one way or the other, we find the reference of other arts, whether it is painting, whether it is music, whether it is dancing, whether it is singing, or any other, we can say, the performing arts, visual arts, or we can say there is another branch called fine arts. So these are arts we see the references in our literature. And English literature, mostly if we see from ancient times to the moderns, there is always a relation, or we can say the correlation between other arts. So in today's session, we are going to discuss. We'll begin first with the introduction, then we'll go and study the relationship between literature and other arts, then what is ekpheris, then literature and other arts, poetry and visual arts, poetry and music, comparison, and we'll sum up at the end and we'll check your progress, that what kind of questions that you should learn from this chapter. So now let us begin. That L.R. Porte. So this is the very famous, I would like to begin with this French saying, which means art for art's sake. Means Edgar Allan Poe, one of the very famous American poet, who discusses this about in regard to the purpose of writing, that how the poetic principles poem is written solely for the poem's sake, not from the and what are the point that poetry has. Like means the primary aim of any art is pleasure, for to get pleasure from the other, like the pleasure that it accords is invaluable as it connects with the supreme. So to this aspect, all other aims are subservient and secondary, and a creative artist provides a kind of an expression through her creativity to various aspects of our existence. There are various forms of art, for example, literature, music, painting, sculpture, etc. But all these are forms of simultaneously aimed at creating the most elevated and at the end of the day, their expression of mind and heart. One often considers such creativity as the gift of God. Now, having a brief introduction, we'll say that how it is relevant to each other. The question that comes into your mind, that when we talk about literature, then how it is connected with other arts. Because there are a lot of arts like sculpture, painting, dancing, music. So these are we can say the other performing arts also has its reference in the literature. And that's we're going to discuss in this lecture in detail. So now relationship between literature and other arts. So literary arts, performing arts, and the visual arts. So if we want to divide a particular, we can say in a if you want to classify this topic, literature and other arts, we can divide other arts in 3 sections. That is, first we study literary arts. Then the second is performing arts. And the third is visual arts. So now let's look at the literary arts. It deals essentially with literature, drama, poetry, and prose. So prose has 2 categories, fiction and non-fiction. Fiction are stories written to entertain the reader, which are from the writer's imagination and are not true. So the fiction it is also known as novel. And the non-fiction, which is, we can say the element of, we can say the factual things is included in that particular story, like non-fiction prose. So non-fiction prose consists of essays which may be philosophical exposition on a particular themes. Means the things that we read in everyday life. Fiction are stories, and the non-fiction, as we all know, as a literature student, we all know that what is the difference between fiction and non-fiction. So fictional stories are very much, we can say, a kind of an imagination of a writer, where when we study non-fictional works like autobiography, when we study a kind of a factual reports and everything that is relevant to the, we can say, the original things that happening around the world, that is a kind of, we can say, not, that is non-fiction. In non-fiction works, we can say there are essays, philosophical exposition, and particular themes that are included on a particular topic can be discussed. So literary arts, we divide in literature in prose and verse, and there are other categories like poetry, drama, fiction, non-fiction, and they have a kind of, we can say, a subcategories. So literature has, we can say, a vast scope in terms of artistic pleasure. So these are the literary arts. Now let us move on to the second thing, that is the performing arts. The performing arts include performances, music, dance, and film, which can see. So we see many performances of, there is, and nowadays we can see there are a lot of dancing competitions, music competitions, films that we see, and also the theater. Yeah, the very famous theater. People used to do theater in ancient times. Even today, we see in modern era, theater has its own presence. As Aristotle talks about in his one of the very famous work, The Poetics, that how tragedy is relevant to our today's world. How tragedy is the definition that Aristotle gives. And even today, drama can be divided. Generally, it is divided into comedy and tragedy, but there is also kind of a new genre that is tragic comedy. So, in this category, performing arts, we see live drama performances where written plays are translated into action and the characters brought to life by actors before a live audience. Means the kind of characters, I mean, the actor or actress, those who are playing the role on the screen, which is nothing but a kind of an imitation, that, as Aristotle says, a kind of imitation of an action, which is repeated again and again to generate a kind of what? The kind of what kind of feeling? And that feeling is called catharsis. So, in the performing arts, so all arts aimed at pleasure. We can say from the performing arts section, we can say that all these arts aimed at pleasure. So, whenever we listen some good music, when we see something a good dance performance or a good film, the kind of feeling that arises in our mind, that is called catharsis. That is what Aristotle says. Now, if we discuss about films, they are actually drama put in celluloid or in video. So what we see, we can say the upgraded version of a drama, that is movie. Right now, what we see on a movie, like sometimes it takes 3 to 4 years to make a movie. But when we talks about a theater can be done, a kind of a drama. It can be performed within a month practice. So there is a difference between movie and theater. Though we have seen a lot of actors, they're coming from a drama schools, and also they've done a fabulous job. We have seen in industries like Bollywood and Hollywood, and also there are many other, you can say, cinemas in which we find all this kind of performing arts. Even today, there are a lot of scopes in this, especially in these three areas of arts. People are trying to get in more and more. Now, after discussing the performing arts, let's look at the visual arts. So the visual arts deal with graphic arts and design, what may be termed utilitarian art of commercial art. For example, we see painters. Painters is one of the, we can say, painting, utilitarian art. When we have seen a painting. We have heard the news that a painting sold in $1 million, right? So these kind of things happen when a person an artist who made a very, we can say, his beautiful piece of work of art in form of a painting, in form of a sketch, a kind of a, we can say, graphic arts, and design a kind of a new course that is also discussed. And also, if we want to connect this particular visual arts to the section of literature, so there is a particular novella which is right now in very much, you can say, in discussion, that is called graphic novels. So there are a lot of research is also been going in this particular area, that is graphic novels. So graphic novels is a kind of a thing that is discussed with the visual arts when a person trying to interpret a meaning from a particular pictures and text, and how he, we can say, decodes the meaning from that particular pictures. So that is, you can say, an art, we can say, from an utilitarian, or we can say commercial aspect is as well. Generally we say art for art's sake, but art has also commercial value. We have seen a lot of paintings sold in millions of dollars. Even in Europe, in America, there are a lot of, we can say, exhibitions happen every year, when mostly the people from elite class goes and uh, buy a painting just worth $1 million. So this kind of thing happens, especially when the matters come to the visual arts, which we can see and enjoy, and the kind of aesthetic pleasure that gives us. So this is about the visual arts. Now the graphic arts and designs. So graphic arts and designs include fashion, dressmaking, jewelry, industrial and commercial photograph used in the advertising media, and others that people find immediately useful and economically beneficial. So these are something things that we have seen in the, especially for marketing and advertisement. So marketing and advertisement is one of the, we can say, growing industry nowadays, in which graphic designers are very much required to do these jobs. So in literature also there are a lot of designs and fashion, dressmaking, jewelry design. All these aspects are written form, in a written form. But here, in this we can say, in this aspect, we can say that others that people find immediately useful and economically beneficial are very much required. Especially jewelry designing, interior designer, costume designer. So right now there are also kind of a National Institute of Designs, National Institute of Fashion Technology. There are a lot of institutions which gives bachelor's and master's degrees in this particular areas. So in literature point of view, if we discuss that how it is relevant. So right now we have seen the graphic novels, and as well as also a new kind of graphic designing and arts are can be portrayed in a different genres. We can say what we see in reality can be written in the form of literature. We can say in the form of novel. They can be it can be described in the form of poem. It can be described, or we can say performed on in a form of drama. So these all these arts are one way or the other has some connection with literature. So after discussing all other arts, now let's look at some other examples after this, that painting and sculpture. So painting and sculpture deals with an abstract part of the visual arts. In this case, the artist dreams up a subject to draw and paint. Means a painter, or we can say an artist who want to make his imagination into reality. So he just put his pen and paper and just draw a beautiful piece of art. So that we have seen a kind of a painting. As you can see on the screen, there is a beautiful painting. So in this case, the artist dreams up a subject to draw and paint. So just like that, in a sculpture, just like stone artist, those who make very beautiful, we can say, statue of a particular god or anything or any object which is very, which has some value, or we can say some utilitarian aspect in it. So just like that, painting and sculpture, they are also kind of a one way or the other, we can say, we found the references in the literature as well. Just like John Keats ode on a Grecian earth, he got inspiration to write that beautiful poem from the beautiful painting of a particular author, and he just saw a picture, and he just made that beautiful piece of poem. Now, now let us discuss that how painting and sculpture, how it is helpful, and we can say what kind of art it is. So in this case, the artist dreams up a subject. So it means whatever he's trying to, we can say, he convey his message in a form of a painting, or we can say that aesthetic pleasure that he wanted to give to his audience or her audience in a form of a sculpture or painting. So these kind of two arts, we can say, also we find all these references in a form of poetry or in a drama in literature. Now let's look at this term, what is ekphrase. So while describing relation between literature and other arts, the term ekphrasis or ekphrasis is often used. It means describing an object or existing a work of art as vividly as possible in order to bring it before the eye. Jognel Robillard considers it has textualized images. An aphoristic text creates the image by means of a narrative critic, like Peter Wagner described the term as inter-art studies, means how interrelated all these arts. So Jagannath Robinette considered it as textualized images, means whatever what we see and what we read in a particular text is nothing but the kind of image that comes out from that particular art is called textualized images. And it is talk about describing object or a existing work of art as vividly as possible, means in other ways, just like whatever we see, just like when we see a particular object and when we describe it, or when we try to write something poem about that particular object or a particular person or a particular thing, that is called ekphrasis, means to describe relation between literature and other arts, that how all other arts and literature has relation, so that is called ekphrasis. Now literature and the other arts. Now if we look at the theoretical point of view, in the chapter 11, the theory of literature, Rene Wellek discusses the relationship among the arts like painting, music, sculpture, and he points out that these arts have different medium and terms of expression. And the tempo of progress of each art is independent. But the tempo means the kind of enthusiasm and the, you can say, the way it progresses, it is completely independent. And each art has developed independently from other arts. Means there is, you can say, each art has its own evolution. Each art has its own progress. So in this particular chapter, or we can say in this particular book that Rene Wellek wrote, that is the theory of literature, it talks about the relationship among the arts, means that how all arts have some different, we can say, evolution, have different, we can say, a kind of a connection between each other. So that he talks about in this particular text. Now poetry and visual arts. Now let's compare one of the very famous genre of literature, that is poetry and visual arts, that how visual arts and poetry is connected with each other. Now poetry and visual arts, if you look at the Victorian period, we have pre-Raphaelite poets who combined poetry with painting. The movement was initiated by William Hunt, John Milius, and Dante Rossetti. The primary purpose of these poets and painters was to reform an art by rejecting the mechanistic approach. So these artists were inspired by Raphael, who himself was one of the finest painters in the ancient times. The combination of painting and poetry was wonderful. So this kind of, we can say that pre-Raphaelite brothers were they were also painter as well as a group of painters, and also they were writing poetry. So they were, and it is also known as PRB, pre-Raphaelite brotherhood. The acronym used for that particular group is called PRB. Now, William Hunt created a painting on Keats poem, The Eve of Saint Agnes. Dante Rossetti was a gifted poet and a painter, and his poetry and painting, The Blessed Damozel, inspired generations of poets and painters. And similarly, celebrated Victorian poet Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, The Palace of Art, first published in 1832, became favorite subject matter for painters. His famous poem, The Lady of Shalott, inspired the English painter John William Waterhouse. Is paint three versions of this character. Means a particular, we can say, there are a lot of characters associated with these painters who just paint not just for the art's sake but also to make a poetry out of it. Now another great Victorian poet, Robert Browning's poem A Dramatic Monologue, Andrea del Sarto, is based on the life of a great painter. Great painter named Andrea di Argolo. Means similarly his another dramatic monologue, Fra Lapolipi. So all are these famous poems of Victorian poets. It was, we can say, created in a form of painting by pre-Raphaelite brotherhood. So these are some examples given here, that in which how Victorian poetry, and we can say the particular group of the PRB has developed a kind of a interrelation between poetry and visual arts. So these are some examples from Victorian period, and this is how poetry and painting are inextricably interwoven with each other. Now poetry and music. It is really doubtful whether poetry can achieve the effect of music or not. Means it is a question that what we read in a textbook, a kind of what we read as a poem, it can be achieve the effect of music or not. Music, in we can say, verse is different from melody. That music, sometimes the meaning of the word, means the music that we read in verses, means in a form of poem, that is different from the melody in music sometimes that we we listen, and sometimes the meaning of the word is blurred or becomes vague. An attempt to achieve phonetic pattern or rhythm in the poetry, what happened that the kind of word we listen in the form of music is different. The lyrics that we call, yeah, the lyrics of a particular song, that is different, and the word and the rhyming scheme that a poet uses in his poetry, that is also different. So sometimes it, in attempt to achieve phonetic pattern or rhythm in poetry, it sounds different, the kind of lyrics that we use, that we listen in music. So poems which are written to be set to music, however, the composer and the poet are different persons. Means the person who composes the music and the person who writes the poetry, both are different. Both have one way or the other. Their art differs in terms of, we can say, the structure, the poetic structure that a poet has, and the composition and the, we can say, the kind of beat a person, or we can say the music composer has, that is also different. So although there is a connection between poetry and music, both are not the same. Not the same, the specific work of the one cannot be done by the other. So poetry is not mean for music, both have different purposes. Classicism in music is quite different from classicism in literature. Sculpture and architecture came from classical models, and thus we can say theories and intentions are different in different arts. And also it play can diversity and expression, because they were painters as well as poets. Means we can say divide, we can say we can't deny that there is an interrelation. There are a lot of poems who later which is later converted in music. There are a lot of songs which is based on the poetry. So there is, you can say, there is interconnection, but the kind of structure both poetry and music has, that is completely different. Now, comparison of arts. Another important factor is to compare the arts on the basis of their social and cultural background. The social and intellectual background of various arts is also not the same. The Gothic cathedral and the French epics have different traditions, because other intellectual background, if you look at that Gothic cathedral and French epics, they all have other different traditions. So aesthetic value change with the change of every age. Do There are no norms to compare various arts at psychology for reader or an author, as well as the social background can help us in comparing arts. So when we compare each, or you can say any other art with each other, like if you want to compare a particular art to the other, then what happened that it changes, because each and every art has different kind of aesthetic value. So their meaning, or you can say their importance, change of we can change after, we can say, when as soon as time passes. So the psychology for reader to an author, as well as the social background and the cultural background, it also helps us comparing arts, because there are other factors like society, culture, the kind of surroundings a particular reader or author has. So it also helps us to understand that how can we compare one art with the other. Now let us sum up. So all arts, literature, music, painting, and so on should have their own individual evolution. So there is always mutual relationship among these arts, but it doesn't determine the revolution. Means there is also kind of, we can say, mutual relationship. So as in the beginning we have discussed that one way or the other, one art can be interlinked with the other. So there are a lot of other arts, like we have, as we discussed in this in the beginning, that poetry can be connected with music, poetry can be connected with a dance form, poetry can be connected with visual arts. So just like sculpture, performing arts, visual arts. So these are also, we can say, under the umbrella term we called it a fine arts. So in this fine arts category, one way or the other, literature can be interlinked with this particular section. So literature has always a relationship with other arts, and also we can say not just with arts, but literature is also connected with every aspect of our life. So, but it doesn't determine their evolution. The task of the art of historian is to evolve the set of descriptive terms in each or based on the specific characteristics of each art. Thus, poetry today, or we can say, or any literature that today need a new poetics technique of analysis. It cannot be done in terms of the other arts. Once we establish the outlines for strict literary evolution, we can establish the same. We can say we can establish the same for the evolution of other arts also. Thus, various arts, literature, music, painting, etc., have their own evolution. So, if you want to sum up in a few words, we can say that each and every art, we can say from ancient times to modern times, one way or the other, they have that is evolved from a particular, we can say, place or a region. Just like each and every region in the world has its own culture, own, we can say, arts, own traditions. So just like in India, in our particular state, we have also our own culture in which we draw, paints. We made so many stone artist product. Just like from a particular place, when we got some minerals, we make some sculpture out of it. We make some paintings. So just like this kind of communities are still exist, and also their arts has relevance in the literature. So in the literature, there was also connection. There are a lot of authors that we have discussed in the slide of Victorian poets. I have put an example of, I have given example of Victorian poetry, that how Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood talks about the various paintings by various paintings into into the into the into the paintings that they uh, draw for a particular author. So in today's session, we have discussed that how literature and other arts is discussed with each other. Now, check your progress. Just try to find out these answers of these two questions. That is there any kind of relationship between literature and other arts, possible or not? And the second is that discuss how poetry expresses visual arts. So these are the two questions that you need to work upon, and we'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you all.
स्वाध्यायः